Coach, I think you're 1-2 against teams with pace over 70 possessions a game. How have you felt like y'all have handled that challenge or grown heading into another plus 70 plus?
I looked at it a little bit yesterday. I guess it would have been Sunday, Travis. Just kind of the process that I go through and trying to study a team before I actually watch, just trying to get a feel for it. And I was at home, it was after church, and I told Corey, I go, I don't think this has ever happened. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I'm just studying these numbers. I said, I don't think this has happened since we've lived here. And I went back through some of my notes. This will be the fastest team that we've played since we moved here. 48% transition volume rate. The number one offense in the country. And I don't know exactly what games were played last night. I know it wasn't many because of the football game, but as of Sunday, they were the 8th fastest team in the country. So you have the best offense in the country, numerically. 48% of your shots are in transition. And you're the 8th fastest team. We've never played a team this fast. And so, obviously, I'm aware of the 3 teams that you talked about thus far this season, but that pales in comparison to how fast Missouri plays. And, I do all of that before I start watching them. I knew some of those players because I'm close with Coach Gates and was involved during his time at Cleveland State and even with Missouri. I knew some of those players played for him at Cleveland State. I knew number 24 that played for Quanzo. And then I started watching it, and I was like, whew, just super duper fast. I guess it would be early in my tenure at Marquette when we played in the Sweet 16 against North Carolina when they were just zooming it up and down. Yeah, they play ultra fast.
When you look at that kind of chess match, I know y'all like to try to slow teams down like that and,
Yeah.
and dictate your pace and offense. What's the hardest part for a team to make that work?
Yeah, I think that's obviously I know that Coach Gates and his staff are listening, but if you study our numbers and just said, hey, let's figure out what Texas A&M is about, and let's study Missouri's numbers. In some of those categories, we're diametrically opposed. And I think, obviously, I know those categories, but that's going to be the swing vote. Did we win that category? Because if we did, that impacted the pace. Did we lose that category? Well, then that impacted the pace relative to how they want to play. They're really, really good in certain things, among the best in the country, in the top percentile in the country. But in order to be committed to playing like that, there's going to be some things that you're not going to do well. And so it's going to be a delicate line. And I think also there will be some ebbs and flows to those lines because it's going to be or I hope it is. I hope it's such a tug of war on, are we playing like them or they playing like us? You know what I mean? It's because when you watch them, it's like, well, I hope that doesn't apply to us. But obviously they're hoping that they're so fast that it negates what you're trying to do.
Buzz, I think you referenced this the other night, but you had the fast start last year in SEC play.
Mm-hmm.
What do y'all learn from that, applying it to this year with another, fast start in terms of your first couple games?
Maybe this doesn't make sense, but I think some of the lessons that we learned 15-2, 4-0, some of the lessons that we learned that came initially in that 8-game losing streak, I think we were able to learn some of those lessons that applied to this team in non-conference, partly because we're playing a more difficult schedule. And so I guess the negative to that, Brent, is now we have very little margin in SEC play because we had to learn those lessons in non-conference. And so I'm glad that we've learned them. And you could say, well, win more in non-conference / whether you play a good schedule or a bad schedule, and I agree and understand. But I think some of the growth that has happened for our team after Christmas has come from those hard lessons that we learned in games that you could argue maybe we shouldn't have lost. And I hope that maybe because it happened before SEC play, that we can not lose track of those lessons as the next 8 weeks unfold.
A couple of weeks ago, you said there were only a few players that were really playing well on both sides of the floor. What, or has it changed, and what has changed these, maybe past week or two?
Well, I mentioned it last night on my radio show. I think the one thing that I want to make sure that's publicized, number one, is I think that we've played much harder. And I know that that's not strategy, but I think that we've played harder. I think we've played more connected. I think that we've played tougher. If I would have any other justification, it's been the consistency in our work since Christmas. We've tried to refine what we do in the mornings. We've tried to refine specifics of what we do in the film room. Our practice itinerary has not changed very much at all. And we've tried to become very rhythmic and routine in everything that we do so that there's consistency in our schedule in hopes that eventually it leads to consistency in our production. And obviously we've only been doing that a little over 2 weeks now, but I do think that there is some residual signs of that. All success is a lagging indicator. And so it's not really about just today. It's all of the things leading up to today. And we're working today relative to tomorrow's game. But to Brent's point, we want the lessons from today to benefit us not just for the Missouri game, but over the next 8 weeks. Success is a lagging indicator. It's indicating what you've been doing. And I think some of that is transpired over the last couple of weeks.
But it seems like in these first 2 SEC games, we have played such good defense that it started, and at least from my point of view, which is not expert by any means,
It counts.
but that it
You're
started
Olin.
with neutralizing first Colin Castleton and then KJ Williams. Do they have a guy like that you look at? I mean, can you point out to guys, hey, this is how you?
Yeah, you can for sure talk about their leading scorer and leading rebounder. I think the thing that 12 at Florida and his impact, and 12 at LSU and his impact in the preparation leading up, their impact was eerily similar. The way they are utilized were completely different. But they have really good players at Missouri. And some of them have been there, and some of them came with coach. But I think the one thing that I would say that it's not a player, even though I think they have 4 guys averaging double figures in SEC play through 3 games. I think a part of that is the pace at which they play. They play with great freedom. Their length of possession time is very small, but they also are very effective within those possessions. And so I don't know that this is specifically about a player as much as it is the way the players play. And it's not a player, it's all of their players. And that pace that they play at offensively and then defensively, every defense you read about, every defense you played, every defense you've ever seen played, that's what they're going to do tomorrow. To the point that you're going to look and go, I'm not sure which one that is. And then 5 minutes later, you're going to go, that one's different, but I'm not sure which one that is. And so the prep time required, it makes it a very unique scout because how they play offensively numerically, there's evidence that there are very few teams out of 368 that play like that. And then how they play defensively, because they score so much, you got to figure out how you're going to score, and they're constantly changing what they do defensively. So it makes it a unique scout in regards to do we need to spend how much of time in practice on offense, and then how much of practice time on defense, and then, well, they still need to know who their players are. How much time do you spend on personnel? And I also think, obviously, I have the utmost respect and admiration for Coach. I think that's part of why they play the way they play, because it immediately puts you in a position you have to make decisions. You have to make decisions. Are you going to try to join them and play their way? And then how are you going to prepare to play them?
I realize that this is only the third game of conference. You got 15 of them, including tomorrow. But this seems like a relatively important game. Top 20 team getting it home, coming in with your team playing pretty well.
Well, I would say that there's going to be a lot of these, as you mentioned, over the next 8 weeks. I think because of the position that we're in, we just need to be where our feet are. Thankful that the game's at home. It's a mirror opponent. We're 2-0 against mirror opponents thus far. We've won one at home. We've won one on the road. Nobody's in school yet, so the ambiance and the environment is different up until school gets back in session, whether you're on the road or at home. I think we have to have the discipline to be tough enough to just focus on the moment at hand. We don't have the margin in talent. We don't have the margin in coaching. We don't have the margin in execution to go, well, this one, we'll be excited tomorrow. We need to be excited today. And we need to be really good in the film room before we get on the floor. And I know all that's the kind of the coach cliche, but I also think that we're going to have to work really, really hard and be very diligent and very conscientious to continue to put ourselves in a position to be in a position. And we can't be foolish enough to think that one game, good or bad, is enough. It's the totality of all of it. And so we haven't won 5 games in a row this season. We won, this probably says we won 3 games in a row to start conference play last year. But we also learned a lot after the first 4 that we won, and then we learned a lot after the 8 that we lost. Like, you can get lost in the minutia of all of that. And I think the best thing for us is just mentally, physically, and emotionally, let's just be our best right now. Because we're not good enough to beat the 20th ranked team in any locale if we didn't practice today and if we didn't have shoot around tomorrow and we just showed up. We're not good enough to do that. And that's the way we're trying to operate.
They've got a lot of veteran guys now.
A lot.
I look at basketball, though, all over, and there's a lot of really good teams because there's a lot of teams with veteran guys.
It's what one of you guys, like, just when you don't have anything to write about, even if you're our beat writer or whatever the title is, you guys should do a study, and you can pick a sport almost, in my opinion. Maybe it's different in baseball because of the draft rule. Maybe it's different in football because of the draft rule, but probably most of you guys were here on a consistent basis. You guys remember, like, in October following COVID, when they said that the seniors got an extra year. You guys remember that? And as volatile as the world was or is, whatever the opinion is on how it became and all of that, I'm not trying to even broach that subject, but there seemed to be like applause for that decision. And everybody has a different thought on that. what wasn't said on that same day was, no, everybody got an extra year. Everybody got an extra year in every sport. And then that was on the heels of transfer portal becoming the transfer portal. And think of how many articles that have been written about that. That was on the heels of NIL being NIL, and think of the topic of conversation that has become. But think of how many players that are playing now in all sports who have been impacted by that decision. And then the flip side of that, and I'm saying this because I'm partial, think of how many coaches that have been in the crosshairs of those decisions. Like, how old was the kid that was the quarterback for Georgia last night?
25.
Yeah. Okay, well, it used to be the only time I ever saw 25-year-old student athletes, they had just came off their mission and they had gray shirted or red shirted or both, and they played at BYU. That was it. That was the only time you saw a man married with children living in campus housing in a uniform. It's the highest percentage ever, and it will continue to decrease because with each passing year, the COVID year is over. But it's changed a lot. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. But like, hey, let's sign a bunch of high school kids. Well, okay, go ahead. But there's nothing wrong with that. But similar to the first time that I ever talked to you, Brent, like, that changes how you build. Because if you think you're just going to sign a bunch of high school kids and you're going to beat all those 25-year-olds, even if the 25-year-old is not as talented, the wisdom and experience of the routine and the rhythm to be successful at the highest level, it overwhelms the youthful talent until the youthful talent realizes the pace and the standard and the work required. Like, it's changed the industry.
You talked about the tug of war in that this game you hope looks like maybe.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy being overgeneralizing it? Do you enjoy the chess match game instead of the roll the ball out there kind of game?
I probably too much. I just like to study to the point that it sounds like I'm a student, but I am a student, and I just like the study of it. And I don't ever feel as though I have the answer, which is why I like to study. Like, I'm constantly asking my staff relative to what they're responsible for in prep for an opponent. Hey, what about this? What about that? And I also think that, and I say it a little different to our players than I would say it to you guys, not because I'm saying anything wrong, but to me, there's even more chess than checkers when it comes to a mirror opponent, because you know they know. And so, like, we play Florida on a Wednesday, and then we're going to play Florida 13 days later. Okay, well, we got to memorize every possession of our game and every possession they play before they come back to us. And you can say the same about LSU. You know, like, it's when I was in the Big East, when it was a different Big East than now, when Coach Gavitt was the commissioner, 15 teams, everybody vote. Who's the best team? And vote 1 through 15. Okay, and since we all want the league to be the best it can be, here's how we're going to do the mirror opponents. you're going to play somebody from the top third. You're going to play somebody from the second third. You're going to play somebody from the bottom third. And then that fourth one is going to come from whichever third that you were predicted in. So that numerically, before the net and all of the things that all the smart people have come up with now, that was how the Big East was getting so many teams in. The year 2011, UConn played 41 games, won the national championship, won the Big East tournament. They won the Big East tournament, and they were the 11th seed. That was in 2011. That was my first year going to the Sweet 16, and we played Syracuse in the second round, who was in our league to go to the Sweet 16. And I have been a believer in that since then, because if you look at the success rate of teams being invited, that was genius at that time. And so we didn't have mirror opponents like that in the ACC, but that was what I grew up learning, and like the value of those mirror opponents. It's different in how they assign mirror opponents here, but relative to the tactical part of it, overgeneralizing it, yeah, I love it. And our players know what a mirror opponent is. They know when it's a mirror opponent, and there's extra attention to that because within that 10-game season, there's some priorities that have to be accomplished. And then here's the other 4-game homestand. Here's the other 4-game road trip. Yeah, so how are you going to do in each of those 3 categories relative to the 18-game schedule?
This is 2:15.
Right.